Hey, Kerri Seago, and welcome to the Thick Boot Camp podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited for our community for a number of different reasons. We've been targeting you for an interview for a long time, so we finally have been able to jive our schedules and get together and have this conversation about this multi-generational Lyme experience that you've had in your family. But even more importantly, I have a competent co-host this week, as opposed to generally what I have with Matt Sabatello. We have the unstoppable force with us, who is Cassidy Colbert. She was actually one of our earliest podcast guests. And although this episode is episode 369, we've been friends with Cassidy actually all the way back to one of our first, I think, 10 episodes. And then she finally came on and was our guest on episode 59. And then we were actually guests on Cassidy's podcast. I think we were one of her first podcast episodes. So we have this long-term relationship with the brilliant Cassidy Colbert, and she's going to be co-hosting or actually leading this interview today. So Cassidy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here.
So why don't we, Kerri, start with your background. Talk to us about where you grew up and where you're currently living.
Well, I was born in Fort Worth, Texas. My dad was in the Texas Game Warden Academy when I was born. We moved to Tyler, Texas. That was his first station. And my little sister was born there. We're 18 months apart. My dad put in for a transfer because my allergies were so horrible out there. And we moved to Abilene. I think I was 3 when we moved to Abilene. And I was there until I moved 15 miles to Clyde when I met my husband. So I live in Clyde. It's a small, population 4,000. We have a 4-way stop here. We're just a small community. Just Texas. Texas is my home. So
all right. So you're a Texas gal, and talk to us about your family structure. You indicated you were married. You talked to us a little bit about your parents. Are you also a parent and a grandparent?
I am. So Greg and I have 2 children. Tori is 30 and Brady is 26. And Tori has 2 children, and Brady is dating a girl with 2 children. And then we just recently, my husband is much older than me, and he had a child right out of high school that was adopted. And she found us in the last year and a half, and she has 3 children. And that's been a wonderful thing. And then we have another girl that is like our daughter that has 2 children. So we have 9 grandchildren that we claim. My mother has since passed, but my father is still around, and he's about 80. Yeah. So yeah, we're a close family, really.
So it sounds like you have a wonderful family from a wonderful community, and and of course you wouldn't be on this podcast if Lyme was not a part of your family's journey, right? And before Cassidy starts to take you forward with this interview, can you just sort of highlight for us how your experience as a close family has actually also been a multi-generational experience with Lyme disease?
So do you mean who all has it in our?
Yeah. So it's my understanding that your mom had Lyme disease, you have Lyme disease, your son has Lyme disease, and you actually came on our radar as a result of an article you had written for the Texas Lyme Disease Association about your son Brady. But as it turns out, you were recently diagnosed with Lyme disease as well.
Yes, had no clue. Even though our doctor wanted to do a tick-borne panel on me a couple of times, I had no clue that I had Lyme disease as well. So yeah, mother had Lyme disease. Didn't know much about it back then. And then Brady got really sick, and that's when I kind of dove into Lyme disease. And then about a year ago, I was diagnosed.
So Kerri, when your mom got sick, I'm going to stay on the multi-generational aspect for a little longer, because
okay.
I think that my family has multi-generational Lyme is my theory, but it's never been proven. So I'm very fascinated by this. So was your mom always sick growing up, or do you remember a point when she got sick?
My mom was always sickly, and my whole life. Now I remember stories of people saying, oh, she was so meticulous, such a great housekeeper, did all this, but I was like, I don't know that woman. She didn't feel good. She didn't have energy. I do remember her getting a bite on her leg, and what I think was probably a bullseye rash. later on, right before she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And then it kind of went from there. But I think she had it for a very long time because
Yeah.
I got it. So,
That the fibromyalgia thing pops up.
yeah, here we
Pops
go.
up for everyone, doesn't it?
Yes.
So we'll come back to the multi-generational because I want to set the stage a little bit more. But growing up in Texas, what did you like to do? What did Kerri like to do? What did Kerri hope to do in her life? What has Kerri done in her life?
Well, we lived out in the country, so it was just my sister and I most of the time. We played and we went to school. We were latchkey kids, but we didn't know it. Mom and Dad both worked, and just a close family. I was in sports up until high school. It was never really my thing. Very studious, very organized. In fact, the coaches would carry me with them on all the trips so I could organize their books and take care of things on, like that. But yeah, just a close family. We had like 2 TV channels most of my life, out in the country. We didn't know anything. We just played,
That's awesome. So growing up when you were playing, I'm assuming outside most of the time, because why not when you're in Texas?
Right.
But were ticks a thing that you guys were aware of, or was it kind of a like, you just don't even worry about it?
I remember picking them off the dog. It's disgusting, but not even really aware of it. My dad actually even carried a card in his wallet as a game warden, warning doctors to look for tick-borne and other diseases due to the nature. And I asked him the other day, I said, I don't remember you talking about Lyme. And he's like, no, we never thought a thing about it, just never really, it's not thought of here like in other places, In fact, they will tell you we don't have it, but we do.
Yes, you do. You are living proof.
Yes,
Generations worth of living proof, if you
yes.
will. So now back to the generational thing, since I just said that, when you had children, since you had seen your mom kind of going through it a little bit, did you become aware of the ticks of any sort with Lyme? Like when your son got sick, how did that play into it?
It really, I still didn't think much about it when she was going to a doctor in Fort Worth, and I'm assuming he was a naturopath or something because Dad said he could not do the antibiotic prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that diagnosed her. And then our doctor back home, because she couldn't do the herbals, they made her so sick, is the one that actually prescribed antibiotics. And I never thought a thing about it. I mean, she took the antibiotics. I didn't know what it was. She took the antibiotics. I assumed she was well. And so Dad didn't really play a part in me with Brady. Just never thought about it.
Yeah. So Brady was how old when he started showing symptoms?
He was 17.
And you would have been?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm 55 now.
So 45-ish.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So he was in high school, going into college.
Right. He was senior year in high school when he started showing symptoms. My husband came down with the flu, and Brady, back then I did flu shots for Brady, and I do not do that now. But anyway, we had both had that, and we both got sick, but he got really sick and kept getting sick. And so he recovered from that, got a sinus infection, kind of recovered from that. And then he just got really sick and started taking him to doctors, and they thought he had flu and strep, tested negative for both, but they treated him for both. A week later, still not better. Then I started noticing, this weight loss he's been having is getting out of control. His hair is falling out. His fingernails are falling off. He looks terrible, and I started telling Greg more is going on. Take him to the doctor again. And They thought his lymph nodes were all enlarged, and she said he may have lymphoma. We'll get you to the right place, and they started all this testing, and his blood work was all out of whack, his liver, his platelets, I mean, everything. But everything would come back negative. So then the doctor decided to drug test him.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know, right? And I mean, I'm just starting to go crazy going, something is wrong with my kid. I start staying up all night, and I have no energy. I'm a tired person. It's been that way all my life, but I'm staying up all night researching. And my girlfriend said, what about Lyme disease? And so she had in-laws from Connecticut. So I researched that, it's like flu-like symptoms, and this no, that's not what he has, but I couldn't let go of it. I mean, I could not let go of it. And then I came across chronic Lyme, and, I printed off this huge list of symptoms. It wasn't the Horowitz checklist, but something I found somewhere else. And the next morning I'm like, okay, highlight everything you have on here. Well, whoa, way more was going on with him than I even knew. And so I immediately jumped on the portal, and I'm like, I want you to test him for Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm.
So we go in, and they ran more tests, and those tests came back, but nothing about the Lyme. And I said, what about the Lyme disease? And she goes, well, honestly, I don't even know if I got that test ran or not. I just hand wrote it in because we don't run that. We don't know what it is. And I'm like, great. Here we go. Nothing. Then I guess it was about a week later, it was on St. Patrick's Day in 2015, received a phone call, and she said, Kerri, you were right. She had done the Western blot, and it came back positive.
Wow.
Called in some Doxycycline, which he had been on before. They put him on that due to different antibiotic allergies and stuff. So I think in all he had about 34 days of Doxycycline. But other scary stuff happened in between and kind of landed us in the ER. The school called me, and he had lost his vision. His left side had gone numb. He was just had a terrible headache, and so they put me on the phone with Brady, and he's like, it's kind of past, Mom. I'm fine. I'll be okay. And I was like, do you want me to come get you? No, I'm fine. I'll be okay. Well, I'm scared to death. Get off the phone. The secretary, like, this is a small town. We all know everybody. And she calls me back and says, Kerri, he's not okay. I think he needs to go to the hospital. So we took him there, and I told him, all these tests we had done, and that was before the Lyme disease test had come back. And
Okay.
I did mention Lyme, but they decided he just had migraines and gave him hydrocodone and sent him home. And I was like, no, that does not work for me. He's never had a headache. I mean, the kid, what do you mean? Now Brady was like me in that he had severe allergy and sinus issues his whole life. But other than that, don't give my kid hydrocodone and send him home and say, that's it. So.
Yep. You're a good warrior mama. Remind me of
Aw.
my mom. Always putting your babies first. I love it.
That was a
But
full-time job.
yes. So you experienced all that. You had already experienced everything with your mom. You experienced things with Brady. Tell us about when your Lyme symptoms started coming up, when you finally realized that it was Lyme symptoms, because it's sounding like maybe you had some things throughout your life too.
Well, yeah, I had a lot of female problems. In fact, they did a partial hysterectomy. They wouldn't take my ovaries. Yeah, here we go.
I just had one in October.
Best thing ever, right?
Really was.
Yeah, my sister said, aren't you sad you won't have any more children? I'm like, girlfriend, what are you talking about? No, I'm not sad. Severe allergies, nosebleeds, sinus issues, my whole life. The first guy I was with before my husband actually passed away, but he used to joke, and this is when I was 19 to 21 ages, that I had old tired blood. And my husband kind of adopted that and said he was right. You have old tired blood. I was just always tired my whole life.
Yep.
I would sleep a lot. a whole lot. My dad said when I was little, I would run kids out of my room if they had company over 8 o'clock and say, it's my bedtime, you got to go home. You know, it was like, shoo, it's my bedtime. So anyway, so that's my backstory. And then came COVID, and I've had it several times, and I just kept going downhill, just kept getting sick. The fatigue set in like pregnancy fatigue. I mean, just fatigue, headaches, spaciness. I just didn't know what was wrong with me. So I had my monthly appointment with my chiropractor, who is a lovely girl that I love. And actually, I told her back when she was having problems after her second child that you have Lyme disease.
Mhm.
I was right. So she had got more into everything, and she was muscle testing now. And I said, sometime I want you to muscle test me. Something's going on. Well, I was thinking EBV. Brady and I both had mono. Like both of us had pretty bad cases of mono. And I was thinking maybe that's flaring or something, you know. So she said, we'll do it now. And she muscle tested me, and she's like, Kerri, you have Lyme disease. And she said Lyme, babesia, and viruses were what was coming up, Lyme being the top. I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
And she ordered the Vibrant labs for me. And of course, I do. I have Lyme, babesia, Bartonella. I mean, you name it. And I had already started going to Brady's LLMD in Marble Falls. She's a lovely woman. We love and adore her. But through this, I kind of went through menopause, blaming everything on menopause. And then they discovered I had thyroid issues. By the time I got to her, you have adrenal issues, you know. And she said, we may want to get a tick-borne panel on you. And I'm like, no, I'm just tired. I'm stressed out. Brady's ordeal just, you know, took me through the ringer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay. Well, she mentioned it a couple times, and I never, but she was right, of course.
Of course. So I want to go back to the muscle testing just in case there are people who don't fully understand muscle testing. I was actually with some fellow Lyme people last week, and we were all talking about that because two of us had been diagnosed via muscle testing at one point or another. And I forget that people don't actually know muscle testing sometimes. So can you explain what muscle testing is for people?
Well, she holds these vials up to you, and then she like has you hold your hand out, and depending on your resistance. And I did not know what the vials contained or anything. I mean, I was just blown away. I had been interested in muscle testing when Brady was sick, but I didn't know anyone that did it at the time. And I thought, well, he's just not going to go for this at all, you know. But everything she has ever said has been spot on. I mean, spot on. And she said you can confirm it through testing if you want, or you can save your money for treatment. Well, I couldn't stand it. I had to, you know, do the blood work and confirm it. But everything has been spot on. So
That's crazy. I full-heartedly believe in all of that. So
I do too.
I love it. That's how we actually got my dad to fully believe that I had Lyme. Was he came with me to a muscle testing appointment, and the doctor, I had my arm out and he was testing me with the vials, and my arm was going down, of course. And my dad was looking a little bit just like, this is a bunch of BS. And
Right.
so the doctor saw it, and he made my dad stand up, had my dad hold his arm out and had him do it. My dad's arm didn't move at all. Then he just had my dad touch my shoulder, and he did it again, and his arm went whoop all the way down. And he was like, my dad was in shock. So muscle testing, it works.
It does. You know, I think you have to have the right person doing it, you know, and I think you have to believe a little bit too,
Yep.
you know.
Yep. I will get to actually we'll go to it right now, treatment wise. But I did all of the treatments. I did Western medicine, and now I'm in more of the holistic Eastern medicine, herbals and things. And I full-heartedly believe that you have to believe in whatever treatment you are going to do for it to work, the mind is so important. But so how did you first get treated, and what is your treatment like now?
My treatment, of course, we kind of went off what had worked with Brady too, because he and I are so much alike. But she started me, so I went. Of course, I was already a patient of his doctor in Marble Falls, and she started me on the Beyond Balance drugs. Nobody was thinking I was going to have a hard time. In fact, I kind of, even when I answered y'all's questionnaire, was like, no big deal, I'm fine. Well, Lyme and Company said, hold my beer and watch this, you know. So I had a really tough time with the Beyond Balance drops. It started out fine, but then within a couple of months on them, the brain fog, the head pressure, it was horrible. And I went to my chiropractic appointment, and she said, you've got to stop this. And I said, no, it means it's doing good, you know. And she said, look at you, you're not doing yourself any good, you know. I was just trying to push through everything, but we didn't think I'd have problems because I had adopted so many of the lifestyle practices. Like, I was gluten-free, I was very low sugar, I was exercising, detox baths, I did castor oil packs. I had bought a very expensive PMF unit when Brady was sick, and I used it daily. You know, my detox pathways should be open and doing good, you know, and I didn't expect anything. So we stopped that, kind of let all that wash and let me get back on my feet. I hadn't gone back to my LLMD yet, and I was kind of doing cell core products through muscle testing at my chiropractor.
Gotcha.
And things just went way downhill again. And I actually had some scary episodes. We went back to my LLMD, and she clinically diagnosed me with POTS and MCAS. Yeah, so I mean, just some really scary, and it would have been even scarier had I not been in this community so long, you know. But I had some episodes where I went down, I called my daughter, thank God she lives here too, and her and the boys would come running, you know, on my episodes and take care of me. So she made me, she said, we poked the bear, you know, and we got to do some soothing therapies, get you calmed down. And by this point, my husband, who has been so supportive in all this, bless his heart, I feel so bad for him. You know, he never questioned if I said, this is how much this costs, this is what we're doing for Brady. He's like, you're the one researching it, go. You know, so now he's putting up with me too. He said, why are you not doing weekly ozone like you did with Brady? And I said, well, because I can't travel that far, because I took him every day, every week for a year and a half. You know, it was over 300 miles round trip, and we'd go every Monday for IV ozone. And I go, once he was in college, I'd go pick him up at Tarleton, then we'd go to Marble Falls, back to Tarleton, back to Clyde, you know.
You're amazing.
So, thank you. And he said, well, can't you do that in Abilene now, which is just 15 miles west of here? And I go, you know what? I think you're right. Yeah, I can. So I asked my doctor about it, and she said, yes, once it calms down. And I was talking about doing hyperbaric oxygen too. And she said, I think that would be great for you. And we've started, I let everything calm down. I guess in April, I started doing weekly ozone. I do hyperbaric oxygen a couple of times a week, and I'm on methylene blue.
Okay.
And the other thing, I'll tell you one thing that has been so amazing for me, and I would do it every week if I could afford it, but lymphatic drainage massage. I remembered how much it had helped Brady. I have my best days or few days after one of those, and that's just been really helpful for me.
Yeah, so important. I just had my first ever lymphatic drainage massage last month, and it was life-changing for me. So
It really is. Like, I'm serious. the money adds up quickly, but that's one thing I wish I could do more often. I do it usually monthly. So.
Yeah. So you just mentioned a bunch of different treatments, and for me, I consider detoxing a form of treatment. I'm curious, which one do you think worked the least, and which one do you think has been the most helpful thus far? I think you just kind of said lymphatic drainage.
Yeah, lymphatic drainage, ozone. After I have that, I have good days. I'll sleep really good that night, which sleep is sometimes an issue. And Brady had severe insomnia, and
Mhm.
every time we'd get his IV ozone, we'd jump in the car, he'd pass out, and he'd sleep good that night. That's been helpful. Although I will say, like the next day, I have to be sure and time my binders and everything, because I've learned if I don't, that I've probably stirred up stuff and I'm in a herx from
Yep.
it. Yeah, it's hard to say because I'm still having, like, I just went through a few weeks ago, like 10 days that were good, really good. I thought, well, I'm gonna exercise. I kept the grandkids, went out for my birthday, all kinds of stuff, and boom, flat on my butt. I mean, just, it's hard to say what is or isn't working, but at this point, I'm committed to the oxidative therapies, and
Mhm.
not committed to a point that if I don't see improvement, that I'm going to stick with it no matter what. But I remember ozone being a game changer for Brady. And when I say that, it's, how when someone dies and you're close to them, well, at Christmas, you'll think, oh, they were here with me last year or something. That's how it was kind of in reverse with Brady. We're big hunters and stuff. Well, I get to cook, everybody else hunts. And we'd go to the farm. Well, he would just, when he was sick, he would lay on the couch, not get up for the hunts. He was pale, he was lifeless. And I mean, Greg and I both would just be in tears, this was not our son. Well, the next hunting season, and we're talking probably 8 months into ozone at that point, he was up for the morning hunt and ready to, and we're like, wait a minute, something is happening here. So it wasn't like every week he got ozone and you went, oh my gosh, he's better. It wasn't like that. It was like from one event to the next, you saw that he had made progress.
Improvements. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm.
And so was he also doing the lymphatic drainage, or is that something that you started to do on your
No,
own?
he was. I've played off him a whole bunch.
Hey, you have to learn.
I know, right? But yes, I was a friend of mine, but she was about an hour and a half away from here, did lymphatic drainage at that time. And so I would load him up, take him west instead of south, we'd go do that. And he would hurts afterwards, something else he and I both have in common is really high heart rate issues right during it and stuff. I mean, we both have had really high heart rate issues, and he would have that after his massage. We'd have to detox really well and stuff. But yeah, so I had to, she was no longer doing that because she had had some illness herself. So I finally found someone locally, and I go for that.
Can you describe a little bit what a lymphatic drainage massage is like? Because I think a lot of people don't fully understand it. I mean, I've been part of this community for 11 years and I've heard about lymphatic drainage, and I just had one for the first time last month. And what kind of, I know, are you going to like a regular massage parlor? Is it a specialized massage parlor or a specialized doctor that's doing this?
She specialized. She actually teaches it, and I can't tell you. I think there's different forms of it,
Mhm.
but she actually flies everywhere and teaches this. I'm very fortunate to have her.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just she hits in all. It's in a sequence. She knows what she's doing, what she's touching where, and hers is not. I mean, it's not rough or anything like that. It's not like a regular massage though either. Um, I don't know. She'll like drag and pull, I don't know. And she'll ask me how, like, are you tender here? And she'll concentrate more on that area. And she'll oh, we're going to hit the adrenals down here, and I, I don't know. I didn't think much about it the first time because I couldn't tell what could this have done, but it really does. I mean, it's life-changing for me when I
Yeah. From my understanding, it's you have a bunch, your body has the lymph system all over, like you were talking about
Mhm,
with Brady's had been really swollen. And so they try to pull the
mhm.
stagnant energy and blood flow and everything to those areas. And like you said, it's in a special sequence. And dry brushing is a form
I do
of
that.
lymph, like moving the lymph system around. And also gua sha, that's like the Chinese medicine version of like the lymphatic massage kind of. It's the tool that they use to move it through the lymph system as
Right.
well as what something that I've used, but
I haven't used that. I'll have to look into
works.
that one.
Yeah, it's good. It works. I'm
Constantly learning.
constantly learning that. That is the Lyme journey, isn't it?
It is. It is.
You just, and what works for one person may not work for another.
No, right. Yeah, that's the weird thing about it is when you try to help somebody, you don't even know where to begin because you don't know what's going to work for them. And yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, that leads me to a question that I love to ask people because I think it's so important because like you said, like this journey can be so hard and so daunting and scary at moments, like especially, but what part of the Lyme journey that you have been so far with, okay, I changed my mind. I'm gonna make it a two-parter question.
Okay.
What part of your personal Lyme journey, like just you being sick, has been beautiful and taught you about like yourself? Like what has it taught you about yourself in the world? And then the part two is what has your generational family Lyme disease journey taught you?
Well, I'm in the throes of mine. So um it's kind of hard to find the beauty of it right now, but I know it's there and I know it will. Um it's taught me to slow down. I've I just can't right now. I can't just go, go, go like I did. Um, it's taught me to focus on God and family more. Um, Brady's Brady's was really hard, um, but it taught me unanswered prayers are sometimes your biggest blessings. When we had the infectious disease doctor deny his Lyme test and turn him loose and everything, I was so angry. I I actually filed on him with the medical board for not treating my son. Everything was there laid out in front of him, and he knew it. He said maybe in another 5 years with different testing. My kid didn't have 5 years. But we found, so I contacted Allied. Well, I cried for 24 hours, pulled up my big girl panties, and contacted Allied. And they gave me about 5 names in a 500-mile radius of doctors. And one of them's last name was Offit. And I had gone to school with an Offit. I was like, this is strange. So I contacted him and he's like, that's my wife. Get him here. If we had not been denied, which I completely dropped and got off of that with the doctor that denied us. If we had not been denied treatment, we would not have gone to a place that was so beautiful, wonderful, caring. She is integrative, but she does both.
Mm-hmm.
She prefers the more natural things. We wouldn't have learned how to eat and live, and my son, although he might have got well somewhere else, he wouldn't have learned the life habits, things. The kid grew up at McDonald's. Well, I would not let him touch it now. You know what I mean? We just didn't know better. And we just learned there's beautiful things. There's people that care. There's people that are going to help you. So yeah,
That is the epitome of the Lyme community right there. There are
it
people who
is.
care and people who will support you. I
Right.
feel like we are so lucky to be part of this community.
It
That,
is.
yeah, you said something right there that I've been meaning to ask you the whole time we've been talking, because I'm just interested. So that is that, doctor, how you got into the more like holistic-y, earthy kind of, if you, my sister calls
Yeah,
it granola-y lifestyle. Yeah.
My friends call it my voodoo, you
Yeah.
know.
The hoodoo-y, voodoo-y doctor. That's what I
Yeah,
call my
yeah.
doctor.
But you know what they call me and say, I can't sleep. Do you have any voodoo? You know, they want
Yeah.
to know. Yeah.
And it magically works for everyone too. And they're like,
She
let me
is.
think.
I just love and adore her. And she loved my kid. When we went to her, because when I found out about her, I said, Brady, I found a doctor. And he's like, no more doctors. And I said, no, I think this one's going to help you. And he said, Mom, this is the last one. And I can cry thinking about that, you know, I mean, just medical trauma, you know, all the
Yep.
way around. He loved her. He would do anything she said. Well, there's one thing he wouldn't do, but he loved her. I mean, like I could tell him, Brady, you need to be doing whatever it is. And we could argue and argue about it. And we could go into the appointment and not even talking to her or anything. She'd say, I think you need to do this. And I would just look at him and he would be like, well, now we know, you know, I mean, but if she said it, you know, he would do it. And she was so kind and caring. Christian, just a mom, you know, yeah, that she's what changed our lives.
So what are some of the other lifestyle changes that she made? You said no more McDonald's, but I'm curious to anything else that
Well,
she helped you with.
like, well, I'm not good at exercise right now because it tanks me. I'll try and it'll tank, but you know, exercising, getting fresh air, getting out and getting morning sunlight, unfiltered, you know, have to do it here because I take off my glasses and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna stumble and fall. So I need right around the property, you know, just food, you know, even when I thought I was one change leads to another, you know, oh, let's do, okay, I'll do the natural deodorant. Well, before you know it, it's the body wash and, you know, the shampoo. Just one thing with her has led to another, just totally new lifestyle.
That's amazing. And where would you say you are now? I hated this question. So if people always constantly ask me this question and I'll be like, so if you don't want to answer, but like percentage, like,
What day are you asking me?
yeah, that's the biggest one. And I always say it changes, it's not
I,
even day by day, it's minute by minute, isn't it?
it is. I mean, right now I'm pretty good, you know, that's what is terrible. Somebody say, how you feeling? Oh, I'm great. I feel good. And then tomorrow I'm on the ground, you know, I mean, I'm in the RV, if you can't tell right now, because we're having our house fully remodeled and gutted. They did find mold. And so, but I was down at the hardware store getting paint one day. I was totally fine, joking, cutting up. The next day out is when I had my first POTS MCAS thing. I was down for 3 weeks. I'm like, and my daughter put an unapproved message on Facebook about my struggles, and people are going to think I'm a fruitcake, you know. I was just in town. I was fine, you know, but today I am totally not fine, and I wasn't for 3 weeks. It just I can't answer that question at this point.
Yeah. Can you describe how POTS, like what POTS is for you and how it, like your journey with POTS? Because it also, like Lyme, affects, I think, everyone differently.
I'm still trying to distinguish. I'm pretty new at this thing. What is POTS? What is MCAS? You know, I think they're kind of also interwoven, but
Yep.
like I there was a point we could still use the bathroom in the house. He left that so I could have my detox baths until the last moment. So I was in the house, and I think it was probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. I can't remember. I was on the toilet and everything was fine. And I stood up and whoa, I don't know what just happened to me. So I hit my watch and hit my heart rate, and it had gone to 145. I did not think I would make it back to the RV, but I did. I have never actually passed out, but I'm not really conscious either. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
for hours, sometimes days, I'm in and out. It's just, I don't know. It's and heat. We're in Texas. It was 108 one day this week. Today's supposed to be 104. Heat sets me off. I rode motorcycles. Last year, I rode to Florida and South Carolina. The year before, I rode South Dakota. I can't do it right now. And I
Yeah.
miss that so much, but it would set me off.
Yeah. It's it's good you know a trigger, but I'm so sorry that you can't do what you love to do.
I'm whining.
Ugh, what about can you, so I have POTS, so I have a little bit of an understanding of POTS. Well, more than a little bit, but MCAS I do not have. So can you explain your MCAS journey a little bit too?
Well, I'm still learning about it too, but I'm trying to eat really low histamine. Um, I I've had like hives and breakouts. So with all my allergies, I bought the local florist when Brady was little, and he and I were just like living. We were sleeping with the enemy up there. Is what we were doing with all the pollen and stuff. And I would just have hives and stuff. I never really. I think I've been on this journey for a while, but now, I mean, I'll just flush, get really red, or get red red breakout like on my face. It's histamine related issues that I'm having. So
Yep. What about are there any Ehlers-Danlos, EDS
no,
symptoms? Nope.
don't say that. Something will come up.
Something to pop up. It is
Yeah. Every
commonly,
time I think, oh, I'm so glad we didn't have to deal with that part of it. Well, here we go.
here we go. Yeah, that was always me as well. You're like, oh, I don't have that one. And then the next week it's like, come on, man.
I know. Seriously.
Couldn't catch the break. Well, yeah, POTS and MCAS, like you said, everything is so interwoven. And I always found that to be a challenging part through the Lyme journey of, okay, well, is this symptom coming from this, or is this symptom coming from this? Is this symptom coming from that? With your mindset that you look into it, since you have so much awareness because you watched your mom and you had your son and now your journey, what do you like, your trigger is heat. Have you figured out any other triggers, or like the thing that like helps you instantaneously? Like you said, the lymphatic drainage was like good, but that's not something that you could like, you have to go to somewhere and do that. Do you have anything that you do
I,
yourself?
um, I do the Alka-Seltzer Gold some
Hmm.
in hearts. The PEMF machine, I use it, if I'm feeling bad. I use it daily anyway, but I use it multiple times when I'm feeling bad. I've been trying to calm and retrain my brain. I bought a brain tap unit, and I've been doing brain tap at least once a day. But if I'm feeling bad, I may do it 2 or 3 times a day, just trying to get out of that fight or flight. I'm also started EMDR.
Hmm.
Just trying to learn ways, the breathing, that's one thing. The breathing exercises do help.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me because it's always like breathing. I know how to do that. And then when you finally learn how to actually do like breathing exercises and things, it's a life changer.
It
It
is.
really is.
And it
And
took a while. I think I stressed myself out more with it because of like the counting. I'd be counting too fast. I was like, what are you doing? You're not calming yourself down. You're making things worse.
yeah, the fight or flight of it all, that like you just seem like you have so much knowledge. Like you're only, I say only, I don't mean that in like a you're only, but like 2 years into this, 3 years into this for yourself.
Mhm.
And I just like from my perspective, you're doing so great. Just with like you have the tools. You are yards away from other people from their starting point with that knowledge that you have, and treating your fight or flight is so
Yeah.
important. And how did you get onto that? Like, oh, I need to fix this.
Oh, like this is one of my favorite podcasts, and I listen to it. I'm going to run out of episodes one of these days, but I, and then listening to other doctors and reading about it, and then I just searched. And actually, I found a therapist that I love, and she takes my insurance. Like, we don't hear that, whoop, whoop. Yeah, and that does not happen, with anything we do. And so that was, I was like, okay, well, for sure I'm going to do that. I'm just doing, Greg told me one day, he said, nobody can say you don't try. And he said, Brady didn't try so hard. Well, Brady didn't have to. He had me, and I was going to do anything and everything for him. But I don't want to. Greg is 12 and a half years older than me. We were living our best life, every year, riding, going somewhere new. And I don't want to slow that down. I don't want to take those years from him while he's, still capable and everything. I want to get better. I want to get back on living my life and stuff. So, yeah.
I love it. I'm getting teary-eyed. I'm like,
I know,
and it's too early in the morning for this.
I know, right?
But you didn't give up for your son. You haven't given up for yourself, and you're doing all of the things that you need to be doing. And that leads me to like, how, now that you are in this community for yourself, you're already in it for your son and your mom. What are you being called to do with all of this knowledge that you are now learning in this experience that you're going through?
I don't know yet. I mean, I know I see people I want to do something. I mean, it's funny, when I was diagnosed, I had never quit praying for a cure, praying for help, and praying, show me a way to advocate and help. I'm like, wait, this isn't what I meant. I know he's going to show me what I need to do. I know. And I see people all the time that I'm like, okay, wait, you have Lyme disease, but you can't just walk up to people and say, I don't know, I'll figure it out.
Yes, you will.
I have to have a little more energy and stuff for it, but I will figure it out.
Take care of yourself first and then take on the world.
That's right. That's right.
A funny little tidbit. I also fully believe every person I see, I'm like, you have Lyme disease.
I know,
and
right?
my family always is like, Cassie, you can't just say that to everyone. I'm like, I've never been wrong so far.
I know,
That's all
right?
I gotta say.
I know. But you can't just go up to people and say, but then I feel guilty. But then it's so crazy, how do you introduce that world to them? Like, why? I feel guilty sending somebody down that rabbit hole too.
Yes.
Well, but let me add something, folks. I've been loving this interview, and I've been enjoying your conversation. But I do want to encourage you, and I want to encourage folks who are listening to this podcast and in this community to walk up to people who you believe have Lyme disease and share with them that you believe that they have Lyme disease. And I'm going to make that argument on two different levels. First level is we've actually learned to call Lyme disease the supermarket diagnosis disease because Phyllis Bedford, who was one of our guests a couple of months back, has argued that more people are diagnosed in the supermarket than they are in the doctor's office, right?
Absolutely.
100%.
So I think if we're going to do what it is that we're called to do as good people, if we notice that someone is suffering from a disease that they can begin to manage once they have a diagnosis, because you can't overcome a problem until you understand what the problem is, we have to approach people and we have to let them know that they have the disease. But even more importantly, it's more likely they're going to get diagnosed from somebody in the community than they are going to be in their doctor's office, right? So we really have to do that. But there's a second piece to this. And the second piece to this, I think, sort of like ties this podcast together is you're from a family, both of you are from families that have a multi-generational Lyme disease, right? And part of the reason why so many people in your families have been sick is because you didn't have the knowledge that you needed to protect yourself. Right. You didn't understand what was developing, and you ultimately, your journey is a little bit shorter because you now have this actionable information, right? Because in order to be able to be successful in overcoming anything, we have to be aware of it, right? We have to cognitively be aware of it. We have to feel it, or we have to emotionally believe it. And then ultimately we have to take action, right? And we're not going to be able to take action until we get through that process of cognitive, emotional, and then physical action, right? So by now having the knowledge both of your families have, you can end this cycle of disease that's going from generation to generation to generation. But that only happens if you're aware. It has to begin with the awareness phase. So I want to encourage the two of you to do what it is that you're a little uncomfortable with doing, and that is walk up to somebody who has Lyme disease or you think have Lyme disease and say to them, I think you may have Lyme disease, and I think this is something you may want to focus on, because that's going to improve their life.
And I have done that, and I have been right. And then, like Cassidy was saying, she has too, you know. So
I always, my way that I go about those situations sometimes is if I hear someone talking about some sort of illness journey that they are going through that so clearly to me and probably to both of you would be like, that's Lyme disease, I will share something kind of along the lines of like, oh yeah, like I've experienced that symptom that you're talking about before. And then they're like, oh, how, like, what did you do? And I'm like, actually, it's a symptom of Lyme or one of my other tick-borne illnesses or my endometriosis or something like that. And then I always say, my one line is I say, yeah, my motto is, if they're trying to if you're sick with something and they're trying to diagnose you and they're putting you in like a round, what's that, a square peg in a round hole, like it's not fitting perfectly, you have Lyme disease. Because that's how everyone that I know their experience has been, is that they got misdiagnosed with something and the medicine didn't fully work. It would treat some aspects of it, but not all of it, or something else. So then you get an extra diagnosis, and it's like, but if you actually just put it all under the Lyme.
Right. You know, and Cassie, is the other piece, and that is that there are many people who are diagnosed with different diseases, and we're always really careful about, you know, introducing these topics to the community. So, for example, when we interviewed Dr. Ava Shoppy, who was making a very powerful connection between breast cancer and Lyme disease, or we introduced, Dr. Alan McDonald, who's introducing a very strong connection between Lewy body dementia and Lyme disease, and we start to introduce these topics. One of the things that happens in the community, especially in the social media communities, oh no, now you're telling me I'm going to get this and this and this and this, right? And when we're highlighting these issues, we're not highlighting these issues because we want to scare people. We're highlighting these issues because in many cases, the cause of these other diseases is Lyme disease. And if you treat the Lyme, then you have a greater likelihood of overcoming these other diseases. And that's what people like Dr. Shoppy and Dr. McDonald are demonstrating to the community. But because it's so painful and there are so many triggers that are triggering us into fight or flight, it is difficult to try to strike that balance, right? But we do have to create not just the awareness of the symptoms of chronic Lyme disease, but we also have to create awareness about the other manifestations, because in many cases, people will be able to overcome their illnesses if they're properly diagnosed with Lyme, rather than with a manifestation such as breast cancer and or Lewy body dementia.
right, for sure.
So we have to be aggressive, and we do have to play the role that we play. Now, there's another piece of this I wanted to discuss with you, the two of you, and that is the definition of Lyme disease, right? Another one of the big problems that we have in this community is there is no consistent definition of Lyme disease, right? And that's why we see people getting into these debates about, whether or not you have Lyme disease or you don't have Lyme disease, which of course leads to that medical gaslighting and all these other challenges that you're facing. And we interviewed Dr. Tanya Dempsey last Thursday. Her episode will actually be 368, and I urge everyone to listen to that. It was a great episode, and she and I had this really feisty debate. A really, really brilliant woman. And part of what we were debating about was the definition of Lyme disease, right? And Dr. Alan McDonald, for example, who, as you can tell, we are very fond of here at Tick Boot Camp, he wrote an article for LymeDisease.org that argued that we should divorce from the word Lyme. We should not be using the word Lyme disease. We should be describing these illnesses differently, right? And I had a nice debate with Dr. McDonald about that, and then follow up many, many months later, a debate with Dr. Dempsey, where I argue we shouldn't divorce from the word Lyme disease, because an entire world has built around that. We should just take control of the definition, right? And in our view here at Tick Boot Camp, we believe that Lyme disease is a polymicrobial, multisystemic, chronic infectious disease. And that's the definition of Lyme disease. And unfortunately, because there isn't a consistent definition for Lyme disease, doctors, especially doctors who are not Lyme literate medical doctors, struggle with diagnosing the disease, because although all of that symptomology may be available to them, because they're trained, if at all, that Lyme disease is a disease caused by a single bacteria, which will have generally, arthritic symptomology with, a bullseye rash. They don't have a proper definition, so they can't diagnose it. So I'm going to argue the two of you first of all, to make sure that we continue to force the community to define this as a chronic disease that is manifested from a polymicrobial multisystemic infection. And secondly, continue now to do the things that I'm urging the two of you to do, which is to approach folks when we know they have Lyme disease, because their doctors don't even have a definition that they can use to define disease. Whereas when we're in the community and we learn enough about this, we see it immediately. We know that it's there. We know that it's right. And as Cassidy had just said, she's never been wrong, right?
Never.
So I think because we don't have a definition that everybody's agreeing to utilize, that we have to be the folks going out there and helping others learn that they have this disease.
I think we need to call Merriam-Webster up and have them make that the new definition in the dictionary, because it's the multisystemic aspect that I think so many people, especially doctors, miss. And I also think, as we're talking about going up to the people in the supermarkets, doctors, like I have a lot of people in my life that are doctors already or are becoming doctors, and I will explain to them, because you are probably seeing a patient and that's being treated for something else, and they now might be able to be like, actually, I think that might be Lyme, because they're not, like you said, this is what they're taught in their textbooks that they go to medical school for. It is caused by a tick bite, and it can cause flu-like symptoms. That is not the full picture.
That's it. That's
It's not the picture, right? Because, there are a lot of people that debate about whether or not Lyme is a chronic disease. Our position is it's only a chronic disease. It is not an acute disease. It's only a chronic disease. And if you're not chronically ill, you do not have Lyme disease.
Yeah.
You may have borreliosis, acute borreliosis, but you don't have Lyme disease, right? And that's the issue, right? And again, just to support, Cassidy, the argument you were just making, when we interviewed Dr. Dempsey, who's when I tell you, a brilliant human being, right? She went to Cornell University as an undergrad, Ivy League educated undergrad. She went to Johns Hopkins Medical School, one of the top medical schools in the country. She did her post-grad work at NYU. I mean, you're talking about somebody who's gone to the top schools in the world. She has a practice in upstate New York, and she's treating many people with Lyme disease. Is again a brilliant doctor, and she goes to Dr. Horowitz. She actually goes to a seminar where she's teaching, and Horowitz teaches at the same seminar, and he starts teaching Lyme disease. And then she approaches him and she says to him, "Hey, Dr. Horowitz, I think I may have many more people." And she gave some percentage of people, and he said, "No. Almost all of your patients have Lyme disease." And that opened her eyes, and she went from not having the frameworks to see that these people had Lyme disease to then having her eyes open to having that framework. But unfortunately, she didn't have the educational experience that allowed her to even see that all these patients. Now she's one of the top LLMDs, certainly on the East Coast and maybe in the country, because she had now that
awakening.
Dr. Horowitz, right? So, it is important for those of us who have, as you were just pointing out, Cassidy, who have this foundation, to make sure that we're also proselytizing to doctors, and we're letting the doctors know that whatever it is that you have been taught about Lyme disease, and it's probably very little, the definition is a polymicrobial, multisystemic, chronic infectious disease. And if they have that framework, just as a basic framework, they're more likely to be able to now see what it is that's there for them to see. But of course, remember, beliefs control what we can see or can't see. Then they're in a position where they can do a better job. So, Kerri, what are your thoughts about that?
I agree. I agree. And I also want to say, I think more people have Lyme than not. Their systems are just managing it. And it's not just the Lyme. It's everything, and it's when your system is overloaded, you know. Brady and I both were blood donors, both of us. And like I like to never got them to quit calling. Oh, we have Lyme. They just kept calling them more, They don't know. They don't, I just think it's way more common and than people realize.
Yeah, and as climate change brings more ticks to more parts of the world, we are finding ourselves in a position where the endemic the endemic nature of this disease is affecting everyone, right? We did an interview with Dr. Bill Rawls, and one of the things he said to me during the interview, as a Long Islander, as a New Yorker who grew up on Long Island, he said, I guarantee you that if we had a Lyme disease test that could accurately test for Lyme disease, more than 90% of the people in your community would have Lyme disease, right? And he's right. And we know that, right? Because when you live on Long Island and you've been bitten by ticks many, many times, and I guess I have been bitten by ticks more times than I could even count, and that's everybody in our community, then we are all harboring, these bacteria, these viruses, these protozoa, and in some cases our immune system can manage it. And in some cases, our immune system can't. And when it can't, that's when we become chronically ill, right? So it is everywhere. It is everybody's coming in contact with it. And the research I think is very clearly demonstrating, Kerri, as you had argued, that almost everyone has Lyme disease. The question really is, whether it's going to ultimately spill over and the pot's going to boil over, again, to use Dr. Rawls's metaphor, and ultimately we become chronically ill, right?
Right.
Yep. I was just going to bring this up. So Rich, I'm glad you read my mind. About how, Kerri, you had said that you don't have ticks or Lyme in Texas.
Yeah.
And that's just like, so I grew up in Maryland and I'm on the East Coast. So it's more known, I think, here, but I grew up knowing people who had Lyme and like close family friends who had Lyme. The person that first gave me treatment was a friend of ours who is an ER doctor who had chronic Lyme. Her family all had chronic Lyme. And so I was lucky in that sense. But where you are, besides your mom, did you know of other people growing up with Lyme, or what is like in your community with the four-way stop? I also grew up in a small community. We have 2 stoplights, but were there more people that you knew growing up, or has it just been, as far as your family?
Not growing up, but since Brady was diagnosed, I've had a lot more people reaching out to me, and the community has grown. The people we know grows, and you hear more all the time. I will say I wasn't involved with mom as much because I didn't know. I was one of those people that didn't know. And then ultimately she had her few months of antibiotics and it was never mentioned again. Then it went to rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, every pill in the world, which ultimately killed her. But so I wasn't as aware or as involved as I should. I feel really, really bad about that now. I wish I would have realized what was going on with her and fought like I did with Brady. So, but yeah, now I know lots of people, and a lot more, like I say, have it.
Well, I'd argue that probably more people had it than you knew. You just now see it because you now know what it is, right? So I also think it's important for those of you who are, like I'm not a hunter, I'm not an outdoorsman, it's not my thing. And again, I don't say that with any judgment. But people in the hunting community need to be more aware of ticks and tick diseases so that they protect themselves, right? Because there was a case here in the recent past. Well, there was a hunter who went hunting. He came home and he had a tick. He had a tick on his clothing, and a infant was bitten by the tick and suffered from the Powassan virus and almost died. Right. So, and we know 15% of the people who contract that virus die. So, I think when you're a hunter, or you're a conservationist, one of the things that you really need to do is be responsible, not just responsible to the community, to the animal community, but also responsible to your own family, right? To keep yourself healthy and keep your family healthy, because if you're out in the outdoors and you're hunting and you're going on the hunt the way your son was able to after, a year of ozone, you have to also now make sure that you're not getting reinfected, and more importantly, bringing back to the next generation that disease, which is sort of the hopeful way I want to tie this podcast together, right? Because there is a lot of hope here, Kerri, right? Part of what we talked about is now you now have the information that you and folks in your community need in order to be aware of this disease and the steps that you can take. That your journey is your healing journey, your recovery journey is going to be shorter because you had these experiences as a helicopter mom, learning everything she needed to learn about Brady in order for him to be able to get healthy. But then there's this last piece of it, right? And the last piece of it is that it's really knowledge that will allow us not only to have a shorter journey to recovery, but it's going to stop the next generation from getting sick, right? And you're a grandma now, right? You have now the fourth generation, and your family now has the information it needs to make sure that these babies don't get sick. So I want to talk about that, how your lives are now very different and how you're able to protect these children in a way your mom couldn't protect you and you weren't able to protect Brady.
Well, so Hudson and Gentry are my two little ones that live here in Clyde, and I'm Yaya. They come over here all the time, and like they were playing in the leaves or something, and I'm like, okay, we got to check for ticks. Even the 5-year-old is aware of ticks. To the my daughter says, now don't make him paranoid about them, but he knows what they are. He knows what's going on, and he doesn't. I don't think he's paranoid about them at all.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being paranoid about ticks. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're right. But we have to teach them. And that was something that was never taught to me. We just did not know, did not realize. And they're going to know if they're around me. So.
But the other thing that you've done, I think, is very powerfully, is you argue that there are other ways that Lyme disease can be passed on, right? We here at Tick Boot Camp talk about the 4 ways you can get Lyme disease. Of course, first is a tick bite, right? And a tick bite is the most likely way that you'll get Lyme disease. But you can get Lyme disease congenitally as well, right? You can pass that on to your children. You can get Lyme disease from a blood transfusion, right? And you talked about how you were healthy blood donors, and as healthy blood donors, you didn't know that you were passing these microbes onto other people who you were trying to help as blood donors. So we have more information about the different ways that Lyme disease can be passed on, and of course, then there's the last piece, which is it can be sexually transmitted, right? And we can be responsible partners and make sure that our partners are not getting the disease when we're aware of it and recognize that it can be passed on. So this information that we now have and this knowledge we have, it allows us to be better partners. It allows us to be more responsible when it comes to being blood donors and receiving blood donations. We can be careful and make sure we're taking proper precautions when we're engaging in our family planning. But most importantly, we can make sure that we're checking ourselves regularly. And one of the things, Kerri, that I will tell you, as the son of a helicopter parent who grew up in a tick endemic community, we've been dealing with ticks our entire lives, right?
Right.
Tick checks were a regular part of my life,
right.
From when I was a child. And I'm an old man. I'm 60 years old, and we were checking from when we were young. When you walked into my house as a child, there was a vat of Vaseline and a tweezer on a shelf when you walked in our house as a reminder that you need to check yourself, and we need to check our dogs and make sure we take them off. Now we now know that we shouldn't be using Vaseline, but quite frankly, despite that being a bad technique for removing ticks, it made us aware of the existence of ticks. It made us aware that we had to be checking. And Matt Sabatello calls me the tick magnet because I find ticks on me all the time. And what I argue to Matt is I'm not a tick magnet, I'm a tick checker. And because I had the experience that I had during my childhood, where we were dealing with ticks and we were checking with ticks all the time, I think it's the reason why I've never contracted Lyme disease, despite being bitten many, many times, because I find the ticks very, very quickly. Right. And I'm aware of them, and I'm paranoid about them, right? And again, I'll share one last piece with you, just again to support, the more inspirational part of this is how knowledge puts us in a position where we can break this pattern. Is I was at my sister's house last this weekend for Father's Day. And we have this tick endemic community. I was playing with a dog, and I walked over and I saw high grass where the ball had gone into. And I just knew there were going to be ticks there, but I had to get the ball. So I walked over to get the ball. And as soon as I looked down on my leg, I found a tick on my leg, right? But I knew to be aware of it. I knew where they were going to be. I knew it was likely, and I found the tick crawling on me as soon as it grabbed me, right? So it's if you have this awareness, if you have this paranoia, and you can see these things happening before. So the tick never even got to bite me because I pulled it off me immediately as soon as it started crawling on me, right? So these are the kinds of things, now that we have this knowledge about how the disease can be transmitted, and we have a definition of this disease, we can take precautions where we can not only protect our children, but we can put them in a position where they can now learn the skills they need so that they will not get sick. And thankfully, Kerri, you're doing that for your grandchildren. And thankfully, all this knowledge is now being passed on so that these people will not have to deal with this, this terrible disease.
Yes.
I have one little caveat with that too, but not only just for your grandchildren, but by coming on here and speaking about it, you're helping dozens of other people learn this knowledge and stuff. The amount of texts, Facebook messages, DMs that me and my mom have gotten over the last 11 years of someone being like, I found a tick on me, what do I do? Or I have this, because we talk about it. Like you just, and that's what you're doing. You're talking about it. And that's how you learn. That's how you find out things. And like learning, in order to be a successful Lyme patient, big part of it is you're learning the entire journey. You are learning about yourself. You are learning about the systems that we live within. You are learning about the illness. You are learning about the medical world. Unfortunately, you're learning about insurance. But it's a learning journey as well as a physical journey.
Well, so, and it's also, now let's get to that piece, right? Because let's talk about mindset, because one of the things I think is beautiful about the conversation that two of you are having is you are having this conversation about mindset and what mindset you need to have in order to be able to recover, right? And there are a lot of different ways of identifying, right? And one of the things we're always concerned about is whether or not you are identifying with your disease, whether you're identifying as a Lyme patient, right? Whereas if you're identifying as a learner, then you have a healthy mindset. Then you can constantly go through this process of trial and error, because remember, this disease presents differently in every single human being, right? There's a different, we all have a different microbe load that we're walking around with before we ever even come in contact with these vector microbes, right? So we all are bio individuals, right? And then of course, when we get bitten by a tick, that tick is going to be spitting in many more microbes than we can even count, right? For example, some of the research shows that you can have 200 different microbes spit into you when a tick bites you, yet we've only defined 19 different microbes, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to have this permutation of many, many different bites. We're going to have a whole bunch of microbes that we're picking up, whether it be viruses or germs or different things that we're just coming in contact with during the course of our lives. Our body is managing it until it can't manage it, right? And it's going to present differently in every one of us, right? So because it's going to present differently in every one of us, and we don't have doctors that can even define this disease, we have to go through this process of trial and error on our own, right? We have to take responsibility, respond with ability ourselves. And that's what the trial and error process is. And Kerri, you described so beautifully how you've gone through trial and error and trial and error and trial and error until you found what works for you. But you got some insight because you were taking care of your son, but your son is different than you are too, right? Although there are similarities and you're biologically similar, we live in the same community, there are differences, right? So some of the things that work for Brady worked for Brady, and some of the things that work for Brady didn't work for Kerri, right? And the trial and error process is working for you, and that's really the key to recovery. So I'd really love both of you to react to that mindset or identity as a learner and how that's an important, in fact, maybe even the most important thing that you should take with you on your Lyme disease journey.
I think it's just a positive way to look at it instead of looking at it as the identifying with the Lyme all the time. We're learning all the time, and things change, and just like you said, what works for one person doesn't work for the next, and we just have to continually evolve and not let Lyme define you. I mean, it's a chapter in your life. It's not the whole story. Keep learning, keep changing, keep evolving with it.
I love that. I can remember when I was a teenager going through this, me and a group of us created some sort of video thing. You can probably find it in the depths of YouTube somewhere. And we all, like, the ending of it was all of us saying, I have Lyme disease, but Lyme disease does not have me. We thought we were so clever with that one.
That is
But
cool.
it was very true. Just like and that took something for me. So you said you were doing EDMR. EDMR? Yes.
EMDR.
EMDR. I was like,
Yeah.
EDMR does not sound like that's the
Something like
EMDR.
that.
Yeah. And I was looking into that, and over the past couple of years, I have addressed more of my trauma that has come with the Lyme journey and that kind of mindset, and switching from that, because I was very much stuck in I have Lyme disease
Mhm.
and this is my entire personality, and trying to get out of the patient mindset
Right.
into, look at all I have learned. Now I use all of the tools that I have, and I am on the other side. And I have, like, my mom always says it to me, and I say it to myself too. And I've had doctors say it to me, like, I don't think there's anyone else that probably knows their body as well as I know my body. Like, I can tell exactly when, like, what I need at what moment, what foods are going to be helpful, what's not going to be helpful, what will happen to me if I have a certain thing or I don't have a certain thing. And just like, and I think that is one of the greatest gifts that the Lyme journey has given, is that, like, you become so close with your own body in ways that other people cannot fully understand, because you are fighting this journey together, you and your body.
It is a fight, and you're right. You know your body so well after you do this. Remember one time in one of my groups, a question was asked, aren't you fearful? Are you fearful of cancer now that you've had Lyme? And I said, and this is before I knew about me, and I answered it, and I said, no, I choose not to go there. I choose to think, because he's had Lyme, we've had to change our lives and make such healthier decisions and stuff, that's not going to be an option. You can't go down the fear hole all the time. You've got to think, well, look, he's doing so many healthy things now. He's changed his life, and yeah, mindset and the way you think about things.
And that's why the neural retraining is so important. And the question always is, when do you do that, right? And we here at Tick Bootcamp talk a lot about the patterns that we've observed, and I'm going to run one pattern by you that we've observed, and we're going to be building out in another podcast Matt and I are developing, called the Lyme Freedom Formula. And one of the things we observe from the people who are successful, because we are bio individuals, we do have a different permutation of these germs in our body. We do have a different soil that these seeds are or are not growing in us. Right? We're all different, right? But there are some patterns that we've seen of success when people are on their recovery journey, right? We don't use the word cure here at Tick Bootcamp. We use the word recovery, right? And what we've seen is this, there seems to be a 4-step process that folks are using to get to recovery. And the first step, we call this our PARM. Matt and I are both Italian, so of course Parmesan is going to come in, right? So P is going to be for prehabilitation, meaning before you go on this journey of dealing with the microbes that are causing you to be chronically ill, you have to prepare yourself for this. You have to prepare your body for this. You have to prepare your mind for this. You have to prepare yourself emotionally for this. And that's the prehabilitation phase. Then we see people going on a second phase, which we call the assist phase. We don't call that kill. We call this assist because we know our immune system has to win the battle. And what we do is we assist our immune system with various tools. Then we have our rehabilitation phase, where we're now going through this rehabilitation. And what we're finding is that neural retraining is generally most effective at that phase, the rehabilitation phase, where we now have to go through this neural retraining because we had this neurological system that was built in a way that served us while we were sick, but isn't serving us any longer, that we've now been able to we've been able to manage these microbes. And then we go, of course, into the maintenance phase, which is PARM, right? Rehabilitation, assist, rehab, and then maintain. Give me your thoughts about that framework that Matt and I are developing, and whether or not that's consistent with what you've seen in the community of folks who have had some success in recovering from this disease.
I think it can be different with everyone. And I agree, like in a perfect model, that would be it. I myself have had several traumas that I have pushed down. I'm okay. I can do this, and I just kept putting them. I'm talking over 30 years of some really bad stuff. And I decided I'm going to dive into it or I'm not going to get better. I mean, I felt like I need to go ahead and start tackling some of this now in order to get better. So I think in a perfect world, I like your sequence there. But then I think sometimes, like you say, we're bio-individual, we have different baggage. And so sometimes you just need to decide where that needs to come in for you too.
For sure, for sure. So, one of the other things I want to talk to you about is risk, right? We talked about Lyme disease and the risks of Lyme disease, right? And General Stanley McChrystal wrote a book entitled The Risk, and what he said is risk is a formula. It's threat times vulnerability, right? And what we've seen on this podcast is that the risk of Lyme disease is increasing in part because the threat of coming in contact with the microbes is increasing, right? There are more ticks, they're in more places, there are more ways of it being passed on, whether it be congenitally or through sexual transmission or through blood transfusion, right? So the risk is increasing as a result of the threat increasing. But then we have this vulnerability piece, right? Which is you talked a little bit about, Kerri, about some of the lifestyle, either decisions we're making or cultural lifestyle issues that we're dealing with that are making us more vulnerable to becoming chronically ill, the pot boiling over because of our diet, because of the mold that we're coming in contact, because of all the chemicals we're coming in contact with, right? So it's a combination of these two different things, both the threat and the vulnerability. And the reason I'm raising this during this part of our conversation, Kerri, is because part of the vulnerability is trauma that we've not been managing, through the course of our lives. And that's a part of our terrain, right? It's not just our physical terrain with the microbes that we're harboring. It's not just the lifestyle decisions that we're making and the classic American diet where McDonald's is the meal of choice. But we also have we're living in a world where there is a lot of there are a lot of stresses, emotional stresses. And if we don't deal with those emotional stresses, our terrain is more likely to make us vulnerable to becoming chronically ill, right? So my argument to you is during the prehabilitation phase of this framework that we've had, it may look different for me because I may not have had the same emotional traumas that you've had, but it may be different from you. But I agree with you that it's something that we have to deal with from the standpoint of understanding that it's both the threat and the vulnerability coming together that's causing the pot boiling over and making us sick. So give me your reaction to that yes, each one of us is going to have a different terrain and each one of us is going to have different vulnerabilities. And do you think perhaps at the prehabilitation phase, it's important for us to understand, what kinds of things we have to deal with that made us vulnerable to the illness before we get to the phase where we're now trying to help our immune system kill these bugs?
Yeah, I think that would be a great model to go by, understanding in the beginning, wait a minute, these are the steps, this is what made me where I am. But I'm going to tell you, with Brady, I didn't do that. I was like kill, I was in kill mode with him. I wish I knew then what I know now, because I don't have that just kill mindset at all. You've got to, the prehabilitation is, I think, very important, and sitting down saying, oh, what is my soup made of?
Right.
What's in my pot right here?
So there's another piece of that, Kerri, which I wanted to talk to you about, because you and Cassidy were talking about the fight or flight versus rest and digest, right? And when you're in fight or flight, what the limitations are of our capacity, right? And why we rush to kill right away, especially when we see our children, sick, right? Because what happens is it becomes triggering, right? And what happens when we trigger from the rest and digest or the cognitive or executive functions of our brain to the fight or flight portions of our brain, we can only do 5 things. We can fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn, right? And you were a mom. And what were you doing? You were fighting, you were killing, right? And we have to resist that. And we have to understand how our brain works. So we have a binary brain. We have to understand that when we are triggered and we're in that fight or fight phase, and that could be because of traumas that we're harboring. It could be because of, because what trauma is going to do is it's going to make us more sensitive to the triggers, and it's more likely that we're going to get into that triggering phase. As a parent, of course, we're now going to want to fight, but as a person who is on a healing journey, we know that our immune system doesn't function when we're in fight or flight, right? We can't heal when we're in fight or flight. So another part of this journey has to be making sure that we are letting folks know in the community, excuse me, that the emotional element of this journey is as important, if not more important, than the physiological element of the journey. Because if you're not in a position where you understand you have a binary brain, you don't understand that you can be triggered into fight or flight, and that your triggers are much more sensitive when you have bugs in your brain, when you're suffering from medical gaslighting, when you're suffering from doctors who don't have the capacity to keep their promise, which is, remember, medical community promises, we come in, they'll diagnose us, they'll give us a pill and make us better, and it's a lie, right? So when we suffer all those traumas in this experience, and then we're carrying all those other traumas that we had during the course of our lives with us, we almost have this hair trigger into fight or flight, which then puts us in a position where we then can't heal. Right, because we're
absolutely. And I was so there, from fighting doctors and bugs and the system, it was just, I lived in fight or flight. And people, I almost felt like a Munchausen mom or something, like nobody was gonna believe me. Well, nobody was doing anything, and I'm gonna tell you right now, if you think something's wrong with your kid, there probably is. And you need to trust your mommy gut, because that child was part of you. And don't let, and I tell my daughter this, if you think something's wrong with those babies, don't let me tell you they're fine. That's just my opinion. If you think something's wrong, there probably is something wrong. And,
okay, Kerri, and you're hitting it right on the head, right? What Cassidy shared with our listeners during this podcast, as she always brilliantly does, is you know your body better than anyone else. But the person who may know your body better than you is your mom, right?
Right.
and let's talk about that last piece. I'd like to sort of tie up our podcast here. We're talking about that last piece, because another observation I was making, Kerri, quite frankly, both from reviewing your questionnaire and the conversation that you were having with Cassidy. And by the way, this is such a beautiful conversation you were having. Is what my gut was telling me was that the reason you ultimately became chronically ill yourself is because you were in fight or flight when you were helping your son go through his battle, right? And I think you probably had managed this disease, or what would be a disease, all of these microbes, for many, many, many years. And then you were now in this battle of trying to protect your son, and you're now sharing with us, you were concerned that you were going to be essentially accused of abusing your child by making up an illness that he really did have, right? This Munchausen piece, right? You were concerned that, your son was not going to be given the proper care. You were in overdrive trying to find the resources necessary to get him better. And what happened after you got him better? You got sick, right? And I really believe, one of the important lessons here is that, and maybe the most important lesson you just taught us, which is, if you're a mom and you believe your kid is sick, your kid is sick, right? And what you need to do is you need to trust yourself so that you're now not going to make yourself sick. Right? Because I think that's the multi-generational element of this that has never been addressed on this podcast, which is, we all likely have these microbes in our system that can make us chronically ill. We are all, I think most of us are managing this until we can't. And one of the things that will put you in a position of not being able to manage this, if you're a Lyme mom, is that you are in constant fight or flight, because everybody's causing you to doubt whether or not your gut is right, and you can't allow people to do that, right? It's not good for the children. But I'm going to argue, most importantly, go back to the metaphor of when you're on the plane, you have to put the air on your face first before you put it on the child, right?
Kerri, I forgot about that.
yeah. So we can't forget about that, right? Because this is where you are. And now another one of the things that, again, I want to argue to you, right? Another thing that's happening in your mind that I observed with you is you're now starting to feel some wife guilt, right? My husband is 12 years older than me. He's got to be able to enjoy the rest of his life. I've got to get better. No. Your husband's okay, Kerri. Your husband's okay. What Kerri needs to do is focus on Kerri. And what Kerri needs to do is make sure that she goes through her recovery. And what Kerri needs to do is make sure that her mindset stays in that learning environment, out of fight or flight where your body can recover, go through your neural retraining and stay focused on getting you better. And guess what? Then everyone will be okay.
You're right. You're right about that. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
You blessed us with this really beautiful podcast, and I am so blessed to have met you, and we are so blessed to have you on here today. And and I'm really blessed to have been more of a witness to this beautiful conversation you and Cassidy had. It's not a surprise to me that this was going to be a brilliant podcast with the brilliant Cassidy Colbert, not Colbert.
Yes,
and
he's wonderful.
always blesses us. So is there anything that either one of you would like to share with our listeners before we wind down this this beautiful podcast?
Cassidy?
I just wanted to say, I already said it to you before, Kerri. I think you are a super mom. I think you are just a superhuman in general too. And like Rich said, I've been in this journey for 11 years, and that guilt mindset pops up, and kind of how you all were just talking about the mindset and how everyone has different, the framework can work, but it also something can trigger it and you get back into that fight or flight. I had just realized that I was in fight or flight for like 3 months, a few months ago. And then I was like, whoop. I mean, once I noticed that, it's like someone just like said one thing to me and I was like, yep, that's what I've been doing for the last 3 months. But I had the tools in place. So getting my body back to back to regulation was so much quicker. So just continue to build your toolbox. Always have, we all have a Lyme toolbox. Yes, and all this knowledge, the Tick Bootcamp podcast is front and center in that toolbox. Yes, but using all the knowledge that is out there, using the support system, the Lyme community is like no other community. I think, like I said, we are very lucky to be part of this community.
I agree. We're blessed, and we're blessed with this podcast. I learn a whole lot. It makes you not feel so lonely too, when you get to hear. And every one of them has positives in it. So we just got to keep on with that.
And this one has a ton of positives, so I'm really excited for folks to listen to this. And one of the things that Cassidy has said to you is that dozens of people are going to learn from you. As it turns out, thousands of people are going to learn from you, because we're getting on average 50,000 downloads per episode. So be prepared for your beautiful story to be heard by people all around the world, and all of the really cool things that you've learned as a mom with Lyme, as a child with Lyme, and now as a person who is managing her own recovery with Lyme. You're going to be helping other people in this world. And the mindset that I urge everyone to have is that of a learner servant, where we are serving other people in this community, and we're serving other people the way God made us to serve. And we are constantly having a mindset where we are learning, so we're not triggered into fight or flight, and it's helping us on our recovery. So again, I thank you, Kerri, for joining us, and of course, as always, Cassidy Colbert for taking time out of her really busy schedule to join us here on Tick Bootcamp.
Thank you both.
Thank you.